Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Heather Deniston, and this is the Junk You Should Know show. And with me today is Dr. Dan Pompa. I am so appreciative of you joining me today. The subject matter in which you are an expert is very, very in demand right now. So I feel honored and privileged to have you here with me. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. Okay, we're going to jump right into it just because we have a lot of content to cover. But for those of you who don't know the good doctor, I think I was exposed to you a couple years ago, and I watch your Facebook Lives. You've got about a 60,000 person following on YouTube, so it's a great place to kind of find some of your content. You also have some programs and different things on your website, Dan. It's danpompa.com, right?
Yeah, my fan page is easier. It's just dr.danielpompa. That's my fan page.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. And I know that you've got some products and great things, and we're going to put links to all of that stuff down below. So if you're liking what we're talking about today, please take a look in the comments so that you can take advantage of the lifelong study that Dan has put into the subject of weight loss resistance, hormones, detoxification, cellular regeneration. And so tell me a little bit, because you're a chiropractor by trade, right?
Yes, I am. And then I got very sick, and it just took me into a different direction, into functional medicine. And now everything I teach came out of that.
That's fantastic. I also am by trade a chiropractor and now in a different space as well. And so it provides a great foundation, but I know you've done some additional study in your area of expertise. So what kinds of additional things have you done I mean, whenever I hear you, I feel like you are first and foremost on all the latest and greatest information. So where do you do your studying, and how do you get to where you are now?
I'd have to say, I have a affinity for just reading things, I'm dyslexic actually. So I really couldn't read until I was in sixth grade. However, the brain compensates. So everything I read, I'm able to retain,
Good for you.
That's the good news. Yeah. So it worked to my advantage later on in life, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
So it's probably that gift that I have, that I'm like, I read that somewhere, and then I can go back and get it. And years ago, I think it was in, someone asked me the question actually this morning. It was in the late 90s. I was like trained in fasting. I mean, I read everything about fasting. Nobody was into fasting then.
Right.
Nobody. Assure you. I mean, I was looked at as an alien. So I really didn't do much with it, except in my personal life, perhaps. I didn't bring it into my practice at that time. I mean, there were a few cases. That's not true. But really, I didn't do much with it protocol-wise. It was until, later, that it's, I was, I don't know how many years ago it was now, maybe 8, but I started, reading more and more about other people's work on fasting, and I knew all about it. I was like,
yeah,
oh, this is interesting. So now it's in vogue, right?
Totally. Totally. But one thing I will say is that when I listen to your lives and lectures, and when you speak from the podium, you have a way of breaking down very complex information into practical kind of bite-sized pieces, no pun intended. And so that's one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on, is because a lot of the viewers are struggling with weight loss resistance. They don't understand what intermittent fasting is. They don't understand what role their hormones play in all of this. So I'd love to just jump right in and start talking about this whole concept of weight loss resistance, and particularly as it pertains to women, because I just pulled off your latest blog post about women and intermittent fasting, and how there's a bunch of not right information out there that women should never fast. So can we start there?
Yeah, it's when you go into ancient cultures, which I have been, women are fasting, right? They're either forced to fast, or it's just part of their culture. So intuitively that that's not right. However, with that said, women have a hard time with low carb diets, getting into ketosis, and intermittent fasting period. So what's the answer? And I wrote, I think in the article you're referencing, I wrote about my diet variation principle. And no doubt women need this more than men. I think men need it. I think all of us need it. But women definitely, as soon as they start varying their diet, massive breakthroughs happen. And let me just give a couple examples of that. When you're low carb too long or fasting a lot, women in particular, because of their hormones, their body will think it's starving. And then their metabolism gets slower and slower. And you're going down and down in calories in the food that you're eating. And you're getting skinny fat. Your body's eating its muscle to break down into sugar, and you're gaining fat. So it's not a lovely look. Or simply they don't have a lot of energy. They feel worse. They have more brain fog because their brain's not getting enough glucose because it's not burning fat. So the answer is 1 or 2 feast days a week is transformative. Now, we look to perimenopause and menopausal women. And a week before their period, there's a lot of hormone conversions happening. It's just what happens. But some of those conversions need insulin. Therefore, glucose rises and insulin rises are actually beneficial at those times. So, what we've learned clinically is to actually raise the glucose and therefore the insulin to help those hormones transition and convert into active forms. Women immediately feel better. Now, that doesn't mean they have to stay on a high carbohydrate diet. After that 5 days or 7 days, they can go back on their low carb diet. But by putting in that variation of the high carb right at that time, and healthy carbs, I mean, you can eat more sweet potatoes, blueberries, fruit, whatever it is, whatever type of healthy carbs work for you. But right there at that time, for those women, it's transformative. And then the other variation is seasonal. As humans, we're not meant to stay in these long-term fasting states. We're not meant to stay in these long-term low-carb states. So going from ketosis into high carb every 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. So we have weekly variation, monthly, and seasonal.
And if a woman is like, I don't know about this whole keto thing, but I like the idea of this intermittent fasting and maybe low carb, but not maybe as low as keto, can they still benefit?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So, yeah, again, when you're intermittent fasting can lower your carbohydrate intake because you're eating less meals. It can lower your caloric intake because you're eating less meals, which is amazing. However, if the body starts to think it's starving, it's going to now start to work against you. So these pulses of high carb and sometimes high protein actually can work. We know that the variation actually forces the body to adapt. That adaptation on the diet shift actually drives a hormone optimization. And I'll say this right now. The reason people struggle to lose weight today, weight loss resistance, it's a hormone issue, but it's really a cellular issue when we look at what's going on. So when we look at hormone issues, here's what's happening right now. Everybody's taking more hormones. So you have the regular medicine giving hormones, and then you have the alternative giving bioidentical hormones. There's a time and a place. The problem is no one's really looking at where the real problem is, and that's the cell. The receptors to the hormones are on every cell of your body. So I don't care how many hormones you take. If the hormones can't get their message in the cell, you're not going to get well lasting. You're going to need more and more hormone, and then even those start to not work.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is we're not looking at where the real problem is, and that's the inflammation of the cell blocking the hormone receptor. So therefore, your hormones aren't really making you feel better in any lasting way.
Well, I love that, because that segues us into cellular detoxification, and you are a big advocate of that, and you have plans in place that people can follow and can kind of be coached by you on that. Can you tell me a little bit more about cellular detoxification and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I still, because I love it, I'll take clients on really hard cases. I love that. But I'm training doctors around the country to do this work, because you're right. Look, when we look at the explosion of autism, neurodegenerative conditions, in just general, I don't feel well, brain fog, lack of energy, can't lose weight. Those are cellular issues. And we describe what's happening with the hormones. So when we look at what's driving this cellular inflammation, blocking the receptors, keeping the cell from even detoxing, moving good things in and bad things out, the cell is inflamed and it can't do its job. The number one thing driving that is toxins, in particularly neurotoxins, things like heavy metal, mercury, lead, mold, hidden infections, which so many of them are in our jaw. So many people aren't looking in these areas, but those toxins come into your body and they basically are attracted into the cell membrane, and it's blunting and blocking your hormones from getting its message in the cell. So one of which everyone is familiar with is thyroid hormone. So
Mm.
if your cell can't hear this active T3 hormone, you're going to start finding you're weight loss resistant. You have brain fog. You can't burn fat for energy. Now you have cravings. You
Mm.
can't. You're not successful on diets. There's another hormone called leptin and another one insulin. All of those are fat hormones. And if your cell can't hear the hormone, I don't care what you eat. I don't care how much you exercise. You're not going to feel well. You're going to have brain fog. You're going to have hormone dysfunction. And
Yeah.
everyone's going to be telling you the next hormone to try to take. And you'll think this is working, and then it doesn't. It's a cellular problem, but in specifically, you have to detox the cell to get well and to fix that problem.
Okay, and so what does that look like? If someone's kind of starting out on this journey, what does detoxing my cells look like? What am I doing?
Look, I mean, there's my 5 R's is a roadmap of what I teach doctors and now the public of what's going on at the cell that we have to fix
Okay.
to upregulate your cell's natural ability to detox, right? And I've written many articles on my website about that. There's a product called Cyto Detox that you'll probably put in the link. That's a product that has different sized particles, not to confuse anybody with too much
Yeah.
size, but some of the particles are able to go into the cell and into all those inner membranes and even in the outer membrane where I said the problem with hormones is. And some of the cells are bigger and they stay outside the cell and act as a vehicle to make sure that when we get the cell detoxing, it moves the toxins all the way out of the body. And here's why that's important, because people are taking a lot of different things like chlorella and cilantro and all these detox things. They're not real binders. So they
Huh.
grab on and then they lose the toxin and then you get redistribution. It actually makes you worse.
Oh,
So you have
interesting.
to use real binders at the cell. And also, part of my process is using a real binder in the gut. And the reason why that's very important is because many of the toxins are brought to the liver and they bind up to something called bile. And bile is meant to digest fat, but it's reabsorbed back to the liver. So it kind of does this. It's normal, but it holds toxins and then it brings the toxins back around. It's called auto intoxication. So we've learned to put a binder in there in the gut that doesn't leave the gut. It acts like a catcher's mitt to grab the toxins and make sure you don't reabsorb them. So
Interesting.
we need binders at the cell and we need binders in the gut. And that's part of the process that I call true cellular detox.
Okay, very cool. Now, back to intermittent fasting. When we fast, that is a form of cellular detoxification as well. How does that work?
Yeah, because when you start fasting, your body uses a process called autophagy, and it's a new word. I mean, it won the Nobel Prize in 2016, and it means your body in a fasting state will start eating up the bad stuff, the bad debris. So you're naturally detoxing. It'll eat the bad cells as
Yeah.
well for energy, right? It needs that. It'll eat the bad fat. Here's the problem. It can create a toxic release. In a normal person, the body deals with it. And someone who's already challenged, they start circulating toxins and they're going, why am I not losing weight? Why am I actually gaining weight? Why do I feel worse? It's because these toxins are redistributing. So utilizing some of these binders along with the intermittent fasting, as well as, I mean, I talk about how longer fasts are very important as well in this process of fixing hormones.
Now, I know you have you periodically do a group 5-day fast. You have one coming up. I think it starts on the 24th of February, right?
Yeah, February 24th through the 28th. So if you go to dr.danielpompa, I'm doing a video every Wednesday evening, and you'll see the past ones there. So because we start 5 weeks ahead, because we want to prepare you, and we get you fat adapted. So we get your cells used to burning fat as an energy source. Cells can only use sugar or fat. Most people, unfortunately, hormonally, are stuck as sugar burners. So through this 5 weeks, I kind of teach people how to start their bodies or their cells using fat as energy. That way, when you do fast, you maximize this autophagy that I was talking about. You maximize the cleanse. You maximize something else, what happens during fasting. So during a fast, the body will eat all the bad cells. But here's the best part. It'll raise up stem cells to recreate new cells. So we maximize that stem cell formation. And if you know anything about stem cells, your body produces them to heal. So if you cut your arm, it's stem cells that heal. If you need your liver or gut healed, you need stem cells. The problem is the older we get, the less viable stem cells we have. And the sicker you become, the less viable stem cells you have. So we use fasting to raise up stem cells naturally.
Okay. And so why 5 days? What is there something magical about that?
Yeah, because what happens is it takes about 3 days to really dig in to this process where we're maximizing this autophagy. And about day 4, we really see a lot of autophagy to where we start to maximize stem cells day 4, especially day 5. So
Wow.
we hit this maximum stem cell formation around day 5, especially if you go into the fast, correctly. Now, this fast, we're talking about some people will just use pure water.
Hmm.
Some people will do a fasting mimicking diet, which I've teamed up with some of the scientists around this new thing of just a partial fast in the sense of you eat 500 to 800 calories in protein under 20 grams. And we still get autophagy during the partial
Oh,
fast.
interesting. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Well, that's excellent. And so we talk they all kind of go together, this weight loss resistance, and then we talked about the hormone and the detoxification. What if a lot of my viewers are kind of starting to just get into this and they're starting to know a little bit about it. So as far as first steps go, Dr.
Yeah.
Dan, what do you recommend for, let's take me for example. I am a woman. I am hypothyroid. I have Hashimoto's. I had a lot of weight loss resistance years ago before I kind of fast forward and started figuring out kind of a paleo lifestyle with some fasting and all of that. But let's say you're grabbing me back there. What are first steps for that kind of woman?
Oh gosh, there's so much there because so many women have hypothyroid. They're not even diagnosed. They
Yeah.
just the blood work looks normal for 10 years before they actually go, oh no. Meanwhile, they've had a thyroid problem for 10 years. Those are typically neurotoxic issues, right?
Okay.
Look upstream, where you've gotten heavy metal exposures. So the cellular detox plays a big role there. But where do you start? Well, look, I think that many people with thyroid issues, they have trouble even getting into ketosis, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a new word for some people maybe, but meaning that if we get, I said your cells use sugar and fat, if we decrease your carbohydrate count under 50 grams a day, okay, which any of you can do, there's calorie counters and apps for this
Yeah.
stuff, right? And it can be net carbs, meaning you minus the fiber, and on
Yes.
average if you go below this 50 grams of net carbs in a day, well, what'll happen is it forces your cells to use fat. That takes about 3 weeks. That's we call that fat adaptation. So you can
Okay.
start there if you've never been into this state of ketosis. And where does this word ketosis come from? So when your cells start burning fat, it starts to make these things called ketones. And here's why. Your body cells can use fat as energy, but your brain can't. It's either glucose or these ketones. So it makes these ketones that your brain loves. It's
Okay.
actually super good for your brain. So I believe that going in this state of ketosis is very, very important. I believe it's in our DNA. I believe every culture is meant to move in and out of this state. So right now I'm in ketosis, but come springtime, I'll purposely move out of this state.
Okay.
So, but the point is start there, start getting fat adapted. If you do that before you intermittent fast, you'll be more successful. And
I
what
see.
is intermittent fasting? I
Hmm.
like to talk about it as an eating window. Instead of eating, the old thing was eat 5, 6 meals a day. I can tell you there's no ancient culture that does that. So what you do is you take and you eat all of your food in a window. Maybe you start with a 10-hour window,
Yeah.
right? And then you go, okay, I'm doing okay. And you go to an 8 and then a 6. So that means you're fasting for the remainder of the time, right? So if you're eating in a 4-hour window, you're fasting 20 hours every day. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what I do, except 1 or 2 days a week, I feast. I eat at least 3 meals a day. I eat more carbohydrates, right?
Yeah.
Purposely to remind my body it's not starving. That's kind of where we started this conversation.
Yeah, but
So,
it actually brings up a good point because I wanted to touch on that whole adaptation because we're seeing in a lot of the current science, we're seeing that everything from, ice baths to ketosis to all of those things that force your body into adapting is been so beneficial. So I love that you mentioned that.
that's right. And that's part of the variation, whether it's weekly, as I talked about, monthly, or seasonally. Every time you switch your diet, you force this adaptation, just like exercise or like you
Yeah.
mentioned, ice bath. Your body has to go through a hormone optimization. Why? It wants to survive. So you get this growth hormone rise. Your cells become more sensitive every time you switch your diet. So remember, sensitive to hormones. That's where I said the problem is, right? So
Yeah.
every time you make dietary shifts, weekly, monthly, or seasonally, you become more hormonally optimized, which is really cool. So, and I talk all about that. I have a new book coming up in March. But so this hormone optimization can occur via exercise, hot, cold, dietary changes. So yes, that is a key component
Yeah,
to
that's
this.
great. That's super important, because that is something that people can implement with relative ease. Changing up your workout routine, changing your
So
food seasonally, taking saunas, doing ice baths, things like
absolutely.
that. They
So
can do that.
here's a plan. To go back to your say, where do I start? Okay, get your carbs under 50, fat adaptation. Okay,
Okay.
it may take like maybe let's just say you do that for the first month. The second
Okay.
month, this is all in my book because I have a 7-week plan for people. But
Okay. And can I stop you there? What's the name of your book, and when does it come out?
well, it's called the stenomic solution, meaning you raise stem cells, and stenomics is the process of things we can do to raise our natural stem cells. Okay, so
Okay.
that's what it is. But anyway, and it comes out in March. It'll come out in late
Okay.
March.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
the first month we basically want to get fat adapted. Okay, so then the next step is now we can start to, if you evaluate how many meals you eat a day, you'd be surprised, because a handful of nuts is a meal. A kombucha drink is a meal. It raises glucose and insulin. So the next step is cut out all snacks and just eat 3 meals. Okay.
Interesting.
You see where
Okay.
I'm going with this. So fat
Yes.
adapt, cut out all snacks to 3 meals. And by the way, it's harder than you think, because on average, Americans are eating 17 to 21 meals a day,
Oh my
meaning they put
gosh.
food in their mouth that many times. So stop that. All right. And then the next step is what we call the next step is bring your window down, like I explained. So maybe it's a 10-hour window, 8-hour window. So bring all your meals, those 3 meals if you want, into one window. You could eat 2 meals in that window, or you could eat all 3, but
Yeah.
go like this with your meals. Okay, now we're intermittent fasting. The next step is something I call my 5-1-1. Here's my diet variation principle. Okay, 5 days of the ketosis diet, of the low carb, right?
Okay.
One day, I don't care what day, you eat only 1 meal. Now you're fasting for 24 hours, but you're going to be ready for that
Yeah.
because you're fat adapted better, right? Then the next one, I said 5-1-1, right? The next one is your feast day. Mine is always on Saturday. So 5-1-1. Okay, so I'm not going to go any deeper than that. You have to get the book. But
Yes.
that is a progression that we've
That's
learned
great.
clinically, training doctors. That progression works, and it's the timing of that is very critical.
That's great, and I love that you have a Fat Saturday. I think that's such a great thing, and it does just go with the variety that you're discussing.
And I'll say this for you thyroid people: sometimes 2 or 3 feast days actually works better.
Oh,
So
interesting.
almost every other day, you feast, you famine, you feast, you famine. So again, it's that forcing the adaptation. So
I like
sometimes,
that.
yeah, sometimes for thyroid people, and again, adding in 5 days every month at least of the feast also helps your thyroid people in women. And if you are still, going through menopause, or if you're perimenopause, still
Mhm.
getting a period, well, what you want to do is do that the week before your cycle.
Okay, that's really good to know. And one question I have for you, fat adapted, for someone who, do you still test? Do you still use strips to test or do you just know?
Yeah, yeah. So I do. I mean, and again, if you watch my Facebooks, I'm going to show that this coming up Wednesday night. But so we use you can go to getketomojo.com
Okay.
and getketomojo.com, and it's like a $65 device, and you have $1 strip, and you just test your morning ketones, and when you get above 0.5, you're in ketosis. You're fat adapted.
Okay.
So morning is best, and do that before you do anything, before you exercise. That way you get the most accurate measurement.
Accurate. Okay, that's good to know, because I think some people are like, okay, that's all good, but I don't know if I'm in ketosis or not. So you do have to actually, you have to test. You have to test.
Yep, a 0.5 and above, and we're testing your beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone in your blood.
Okay, very good. My goodness, we've gotten through a wealth of information in a short amount of time.
We did. I don't think I've ever gone through all of that information, from cellular detox to diet variation, fasting, ever in that short period of time.
That was fantastic.
I take my hat off to you, because you led it well. I don't know how you did that.
Thank you so much. I know you have an appointment after this. You've been super kind to give your time. We are going to put all the relevant links down below. I see Ashley is down there putting a few links already, which is great. And guys, next fast is up February 24th. If this is of interest to you, please go to his website, read about it, get signed up. The new book is coming out in March. We've got all sorts of great stuff down below. I am a follower and a fan, Dr. Dan, and I thank you for what you're putting out into the world. I'm so grateful for you, and I know everybody who's watching appreciates you as well. Thank you so much. We will say goodbye, Dan. Stay on just for a minute so I can give you a big thank you. And folks, we'll see you next Friday at noon on the Junk You Should Know show. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out.
And share the video.
Share the video. Share the video. That's right. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.